have sworn I heard him walking in the middle of the night. The sound of nails clicking against the wooden floor, coming up to the door of my room. But they were slow and deliberate. They weren't like the quickness of Sandy realizing I'd gone to bed and coming to curl up. I heard the noises stop outside of my bedroom, but I didn't hear him whine. He was acting weird, and it was disturbing me. But after a while, I managed to fall into a deep sleep. When I awoke next morning, I thought it was a dream. Sandy was still sitting in the upright position I left him in when I went to bed. It was as though he didn't move a muscle the entire night. And when I said good morning, he didn't wag his tail at all. He did follow me into the kitchen, though. But he paused at the doorway when I put his bowl down on the floor and filled it up with supermarket dog food. Once again, his back half moved weirdly as he slowly made his way towards me. There was a nagging feeling that something was off-putting about the way he looked that day. It was like he had gotten longer overnight. Sandy hunched down again, like when he was walking to the door the night before. He didn't come into the kitchen. I figured he would have been hungry being out in the wild for so long. But he eyed me, like he was waiting for me to come a little closer, rather than to touch the food. It goes without saying, but after a few moments of a staring contest between me and my unflinching dog, I called off that foolishness and called his name out loudly. Not even a flinch in response. I didn't want to move closer to the dog to leave the kitchen door. But this was Sandy, and the most damage he'd ever done was eat flies. Sure enough, as I passed him, he turned his body and swayed unnaturally, but he didn't move towards me. When I left that day, I couldn't find anything. The deer tracks in the mud were made a few days prior, and went cold off naturally made trails through the woods. I couldn't hear birds, or even the howl of a nearby coyote. The only sounds for miles away from the campsite were my own breathing and the sound of crunching leaves underneath my feet. When the sun started to set, I started making my way back. Little did I know I should have just packed my shit and left. Just behind a cluster of trees with the house just visible beyond the rise. I figured I found out the reason why animals had abandoned this place. Generally, when there are mass animal deaths, that usually means that something is wrong in the area of the slaughter. I saw hundreds of squirrels disemboweled and strewn across the grass in an almost perfect circle. Most of them were skinned alive. But when I turned to throw up all the contents in my stomach, there were a few dozen that were inside out. I couldn't help but vomit repeatedly as I tried my best to walk around the circle of tiny organs and mashed up bodies. Not just over the sight, but because the smell was ungodly. I don't know how long they'd been out there, but if I'd stumbled across this sooner, I'd have left with Sandy in tow immediately. Gradually, the body stopped and delved off into a random dead squirrel here and there. The biggest thing I managed to find, just a few feet off the unholy feeding ground, was a deer. It looked as though something had decided to skin it alive from hide to neck and draped some of the skin over a branch like someone was tanning it. I don't know how long it had been there, but it smelled like it had been dead for hours. Despite the fact that there wasn't a single fucking fly, the head had been cut off clean just above the shoulders. And when I realized the organs had been removed, I moved from a walking pace through the forest to a sprint. Thankfully, the cabin wasn't too far off. I threw up one final time, wiped my mouth off on the back of my sleeve, and looked up to the house to see Sandy watching me from the window. I tried to reason with myself and tell myself that Sandy's odd behavior was probably just trauma. I know that's dumb to think of now, but at the time it was the only coping mechanism I could think of. The elongating body could have just been the loneliness getting to me. Sandy had realized there was something up with this place, and the second he noticed it, I should have taken this warning and taken off back into town. Once the door was shut behind me, I started packing the food and essentials back into boxes, moving quickly to try and get my things into the truck before night came. It'd be dangerous to try and maneuver my way through the trails at night, as the hills off Kelly's Mountain were steep, and in pitch darkness with my only companion being headlights, it would have been easy to slide off a ravine and never be heard from again. I didn't want to stay one more second, but I had no choice. I had gotten back to the house just moments before the sun finally went out of sight, and I was bathed in a navy blue sky once again. I didn't pay attention to Sandy. He just sat at his bed and watched me pack. I figured no harm, no foul. I'd throw his stuff in the truck in the morning, and we'd be back in town before night the next day. Glancing at him for just a moment, it was a passing thought. He was looking longer today. I decided to just sit in bed. It was a hard time trying to fall asleep for the next few hours. It must have been close to 4 or 5 hours in the morning when I heard it. The sound of whistling. The same whistle I use to call my dog. I broke out into a cold sweat when I realized that whoever murdered those squirrels, hung their skin up and mutilated their corpses, could have very well broken into my house. The door to my room didn't make a sound as I opened it slowly. I waited a moment, listening to someone call my dog for a few more seconds. I dared to poke my head out from the doorframe to get a good look, and whoever it was that could have been hurting Sandy. The outside door was open. All I saw was Sandy's back half, too long and lanky, almost coiled around the back of the door. I saw his front half peering outside. Whatever it was that had impersonated my dog, it was whistling slowly, calling for Sandy. When I could have sworn that it had hunched down to the ground again and called for him. It was the most nightmare-inducing voice I'd ever heard in my life. I closed the door just as softly as I'd opened it. I don't know how long I waited with my back pressed up against the door. I know I left my gun and my bag on the coat rack. I know I didn't sleep. I waited until I saw the sun break over the horizon. Then I waited some more. Until it must have been midday, and I finally got the balls to open the door and sprint for the truck as fast as I could. I wasn't going to let myself die in that place. Sandy was gone, and the door was wide open. I didn't bother packing his stuff. I just threw my bag over my shoulder, made my way to the car as fast as I could, and turned on the ignition. I can't describe the feeling that overcame me as I realized that I'd have to leave Sandy in this place. The real Sandy. The thought that he was dead right now never crossed my mind. I don't think I could cope with the knowledge that whether I allowed in my house, whatever disemboweled those animals, could have done the same with him. I began to drive off. Just as I was pulling off onto the cement, I felt something hard hit the back of my windshield, sending broken glass into the passenger seat. I only caught a glimpse of the decapitated deer head catching on unbroken glass and tumbling into the back of my seat. I floored it all the way there. Tears streamed my face for the entire way home, hands clenching the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I wish I could leave this story off with a positive note. I wish I could tell you that I found Sandy at home waiting for me. But that didn't happen. Last night, I found it hard to sleep. I kept replaying the entirety of my trip to Kelly's Mountain in my head. I knew I wouldn't be sleeping for a while, and laid there, listening to the wind through my open window. And I know the sound of that voice will forever echo in my